Hello and welcome to Political Paradigm, coming to you live from our Abuja studios. I'm Terry Ikumi. It's 24 hours now since we got a new president, Senator Bola Tinubu. He has his work cut out for him. He made quite some firm statements yesterday. My guest today is the CEO of Connected Development. Connected Development is a non-profit organization which creates platforms for dialogue and builds citizens' capacity to hold their government accountable. My guest is Hamzat Lawal. Welcome to Political Paradigm, Hamzat.
Well, thank you, Terry, for having me.
Hamzat, before we talk about the inauguration and the president's speech, let's do a quick throwback to the pre-inauguration concerns now. One of them is the Supreme Court's judgment that gave a nod to that inauguration. Did that come to you as a surprise?
Well, before that time, everyone was uptight, and because we didn't know where it would swing, but that really helped to douse the tension. And I really like the stand of the Supreme Court, setting precedents and also referencing, a case in the past. And this has also helped to bring stability and douse the tension that would have erupted, because what would have happened would have been a constitutional crisis if the Supreme Court hadn't given a nod to the continuation of the inaugural process.
So I think it's commendable, however, that the event lasted and went ahead smoothly, concluded smoothly, right?
Oh, yes.
Because there were concerns initially, there were protest concerns and security concerns ahead of this because of the agitations in the public space.
Oh, yes. And I think we must commend the joint security agencies and also the judiciary in playing their role in interpreting our laws, and particularly the Constitution, and also addressing parties that were aggrieved and ensuring that the rule of law prevail. But our security agencies actually lived up to expectation. I sat in the comfort of my house and I watched the proceeding. It was really historic. It was exciting. It was historical, and it gave hope that our democracy is being strengthened. There's been smooth transition, and this has sent a signal to countries that are partners that Nigeria has really entrenched democracy.
Okay, now we have a new president, Hamzat. There are some concerns based on what he said. Nigerians want to know whether they should be, hopeful, because in the past 8 years rather, it's the same political party. And then we have the same APC taking over for the next 8 years. There are concerns as to how the last 8 years were, and we will talk about that in detail as well. But then when you look at the man in charge now and his antecedents, compare that to the antecedents of the APC in the past 8 years, what would you say that Nigerians should look forward to?
Well, the only thing we have as humans and would continue to keep us going is hope. We must remain hopeful, because the day we lose hope, then that will be the end of humanity. Yes, it's the same platform, which is the All Progressive Congress, that have brought back the president of the country. But it's the same, it's different people, the same party, but different people. And you can't take it away that, yes, you have this institution that brought in a process, primary election that gave a flag bearer, and then the general election that got Bola Ahmed Tinubu declared president-elect, and now he's the president. So, yes, but even when you look at the antecedent of President Bola Tinubu, what he did in Lagos, and most importantly, beyond what he did economically and how he builds people and mentor a lot of people in the political space, he's the only politician of his own class that have remained relevant consistently till date. Managing various crises, managing diverse group, and building bridges across the Niger. So I think there's so much to be hopeful for. There's so much to learn, and you cannot compare Buhari's administration and wanting to reflect it to what will become of President Bola Tinubu. It will be unfair on the man. Today is just his first day after being sworn in. But I believe that there's hope. I believe that the next couple of days and week would inform what will become the next 4 years of our life. I say our life because each and every one of us are part of it. His decision would reflect on us and would impact on us as a people and as a country. But I'm hopeful that he will do well. And when you look at even his speech when he was declared winner, when he collected the certificate of return, and even yesterday at the Eagle Square, what he said.
Were you impressed with
I was very pressed. It was clear. There was no ambiguity. It was clear. It was simple. Even an illiterate would understand what he said.
Firm.
It was firm and very courageous, you know?
That's the kind of feedback I've seen online as well and from analysts. But there are concerns as to whether he missed something. Do you think he missed anything yesterday?
Well, when you read his speech and when you listen to him, there are some things in his speech that he did not stress on. So when he was speaking, he didn't talk about education.
And
he
healthcare.
He didn't talk about
Absolutely.
healthcare. He made mention of the fuel subsidy, that it is no more after the end of June. Because when you look at the appropriation, it only made provision till the end of June. He didn't clearly state that the savings from the subsidy will go to healthcare, will go to education. You know, he just said subsidy was gone. So there was no clarity there. Yes, in his speech, and for those who had the opportunity to read his speech, it was clearly stated there, but he did not communicate it effectively and efficiently.
Before we look at what he said, we already mentioned the things he didn't say, specifically healthcare,
Education.
and education. Those are very important aspects of every nation, especially considering that we're coming from 8 years of a minister who has said that he had no idea what education was about. Well, he sat in that saddle for 8 years. And if you look at the budget of the government in the past 8 years, it clearly showed, even healthcare, it clearly showed that not much attention was paid to either of those two and falls short of global standards for budgeting for either of them. So what does that now say of a Tinubu administration, considering that those two items were omitted?
You know, I want to be fair to him that maybe it was an omission on his part, even if it was highlighted on his speech, but he didn't clearly communicate it. And I think this is also a lesson for the incoming or the current administration and the people he's going to bring into office. One of the worst government official we had, or worst cabinet minister we had, was the Minister for Education, sadly, you know, who has sat there for 8 years and really cannot give us a scorecard of how he had fared, you know. So I think that Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President Bola Tinubu, must send a renewed signal and hope that he's keen on channeling the resources that will be saved from fuel subsidy to education and healthcare, particularly education. You know, just before President Muhammadu Buhari's, the end of his tenure, he signed the Al-Majiri Commission bill into law. So today we have an Al-Majiri Commission. And what this also means is we need to invest much more, because what this means is there will be an inclusive education and learning system. There will be inclusive curriculum for the next generation of leaders that the country would breed. So it means we must invest where our mouth is. We must put our money where our mouth is. And I'm really excited about this new commission because it now sets a pathway to ensuring that street kids, Al-Majiri kids, have equal opportunity for learning and for growth. And this would also help to reduce the burden that they face, you know, the various abuses that they face because they sleep on that, you know, they sleep on the bridges and, you know, they're migrating from one point to another because of their culture. So, and then when you look at healthcare, Terry, we've just survived the aftermath of COVID-19. And, you know, global renowned researchers are saying there's something coming even worse than COVID-19. So what it means is we need to invest heavily in research. We need to start producing vaccines locally. We need to invest in human capital development. We need to be able to respond to any kind of pandemic that will be faced by the country, because this also not only impacted us health-wise, but also economical-wise. You know, we dealt with a series of recession and we're just trying to bounce back. And now we're dealing with inflation. We're dealing with high cost of living, and you know various other issues like even 30% unemployment rate, one of the highest so far. So again, you know, he has so many things to deal with, but I think that moving forward, when he speaks to the Nigerian people, and I think one thing he must successfully do for the next 4 years is actually engage and speak to the Nigerian people. What President Muhammadu Buhari failed is not engaging.
Appropriately.
You know, he doesn't communicate. He doesn't even speak. He doesn't respond. You know, and sadly, his spokesperson did not do justice to him, his policy, and his program. You know, they were all arrogant in how they respond and how they engage. You know, so the things that the new president must learn is how his predecessor failed in communication and how he must ensure that he continue to engage. But the people that represent him, his government, his ideals, his policy, his program, his engagement must also be humble and communicate and engage the Nigerian people, because in his speech, he said he's here to serve. And he would continue, he said it in his speech that he would dialogue with people. He's not going to rule over us, but he would lead while engaging.
Speaking of healthcare and education, it's also important because yesterday it wasn't just inauguration at the federal level, state governments were also inaugurated. So there must be some form of collaboration between both, especially because of the absence or lack of development at the primary healthcare level and basic healthcare level. And this way, it will allow the federal government to focus on the secondary and tertiary levels of these two sectors.
Absolutely, because when you look at primary education and also primary healthcare, it is the responsibility of the local and state government. It's not the responsibility of the federal government. What federal government can do is to provide finance and support at that level, maybe getting grants, credit, or loan from the World Bank and give to the state as grants so that they can function and provide better service delivery, both at primary healthcare centers and at primary school. And the fundamental and foundation of every child is primary education. Terry, I'm here today because of the investment and the solid foundation of my primary education. Because if you get it wrong at primary, there's no way you survive secondary or tertiary, So yes, the state governors must hit the ground running, but also understand their role, responsibility, and also act on it. And this is not time to throw blames. This is not time, to hide under one excuse. And also to the incoming 10th National Assembly, because as a Malala education champion, we've been advocating for a review of the Universal Basic Education Act, that it must be, today what you have is 9 years. It must be 12 years. Because after junior secondary education, most children from poor households and family cannot go to senior secondary education. So they can get senior secondary learning. Why can't we amend it? Because when you look at UBEC, it is a first line charge. They have, constitutionally, they have resources. And a lot of states have not accessed their money, their counterpart resources for basic education. So again, when we're able to review it, we would see, one, reduce the numbers of out-of-school children, get more girls in school, and create enabling environment and opportunity for both boys and girls in, education centers.
Absolutely. Well, let's go into the speech of the president now, take them one after the other. As a young person, were you impressed with the position of the president when he talked about making women and youths a big part of his administration?
Yes, I was very proud of that moment, and I was really impressed, Terry. I was impressed because when you look at what we've done with the Not Too Young to Run law, when you look at the investment, the time, the energy and resources, and also the aftermath of after 2019 election and after 2023 election, the only way we can fully implement and achieve this law, beyond ensuring that young people attain elective office, is also appointive office. When you also look at the outcome of the 2023 general election, young people literally took ownership of that process. When you look at the continual voter registration exercise, even on election day, when you aggregate the people that actually, the demography of people that came out to cast their ballot, they're mostly women and young people. But again, Terry, he said women and young people. Exciting, because it brings gender parity. But what is his definition of youth? Because this is where we have challenge with politicians, because today you see a 50-year-old, you see a 60-year-old still say they're youth. But the African Youth Charter say 18 to 35. The UN Youth Policy say 16 to 24. The Nigerian Youth Policy says 18 to 29. And so that's why when people call me youth, I say I'm not a youth, I'm 36-year-old. Don't call me a youth. I am still a young person. So again, I think the president, when he makes his when he makes appointments to appointive offices, it will now tell us, one, what is his aggregate of youth or young person, and also what are the percentage that would inform women and youth. Is it going to be 50%? Is it going to be 25% or 30%? This is important, because this will now help us know where the administration is leaning towards, even ensuring inclusive governance of his own government. And there've been series of conversation and dialogue after he was declared winner. There's a series of meetings where, they've thrown figures and numbers, but it's still not clear. It's not clear how many women would get cabinet position, how many women and youths would get heads of parastatals and agency and even become aides, advisors to the new government. And this is important because when young people see this government as part of their own, then automatically the government would succeed because when you look at the numbers, the energy we have and the ideas, we have it all. But I also say that we must also have intergenerational solidarity, where older people must now see young people as partners towards progress, where younger people must see older people as partners towards progress, not see them as people who should be in retired homes or retired home, and where old people will not see young people and say, go and wait until your turn. No, it is ripe for nation building. Nigeria is still an emerging democracy and economy, and I believe the role of young people is sacrosanct.
Another aspect of the president's speech had to do with the elections. It's been questioned as to how credible or otherwise the election was. And CSOs like yourself had said that, perhaps not you, but the CSO community had said that this is not a good election. Some had described it as the worst election in the country's history. I recall that Clement Wanko had said so as well. But the president said that it is the best quality of election ever in the country. And truth be told, since after that election, new facts have emerged. Would you take the position of the president, believing that this is the best quality of election ever had so far, considering the position the CSOs had had initially?
Well, one, I must commend the president for even talking about the election that brought him into office, but also acknowledging the fact that it is within the rights of the people who are aggrieved to seek legal redress, and he supports, that entire process. Now, Terry, let's go back to history. Do we want to compare the 2003, 2011 election with the just concluded 2023 election? Let's be fair to ourselves. Do we want to compare those elections where elections have not even held in so many places, but results were written manually and winners were declared? Do we want to actually compare under the leadership of Maurice Iwu and under today's leadership in INEC? I'm not saying that the process.
Well, which do you think is better?
You see, Beavers was a game changer. The only thing that dented the image of INEC on the outcome of the 2023 general election was the failure of IREV, because a lot of people was actually banking to be able to see this result in real time. So again, it is the commission that failed in that aspect. But you cannot totally say the outcome of the election was a total failure. Come on, are you saying that people who actually came out in millions to cast their ballots, that they also failed? No, so let's not throw away the baby with the bathwater.
So by comparison, was the president right to have said that this is the best quality of election ever held in the country?
Well, the president would always say this is the best election that brought.
No, I mean, you're comparing now.
Well, again, it's not for the president to decide or determine if it was the best election that brought him into office, because he would speak from a position of bias. Because he's the biggest beneficiary of the outcome of the election. So he would speak from a place of bias or a position of bias. But what he needs to commit to is a greater electoral reform that ensures that, one, in 2027, even if he's an incumbent president, he allows for fair and enabling environment whereby INEC becomes truly independent and have the resources and manpower to ensure that they deliver that very critical element of our democracy. Yeah. And in reforming INEC, we need to reform how the chairman, how the national commissioners, and particularly how the resident electoral commissioners come into office. And the National Assembly, that's the Senate, should play their role to ensure impartiality and neutrality of the people and the kind of values they bring into office.
Are you saying that the present constitution of INEC does not suggest that it is independent?
INEC is not independent.
Why did you say
We
so?
know that even before the election, there was interference in the process of INEC. Even if you look at the procurement process, how did someone who was sitting in an election got contract to deliver sensitive materials or some level of materials that will be used in that election? When you also look at
was some that of influence, or was that the decision of the electoral umpire?
It was influenced. When you also look at the resident electoral commissioners, are they truly loyal to their oath of office and to the national headquarters, who is headed by the chairman? There was an incident when the chairman could not even reach the rec in the state. Look at the case of Adamawa, for instance, how the rec took upon himself to be a returning officer. So again, we must set a clear pathway to reform INEC and make her truly independent without external interference. And this is where security agencies also play their role. Because see, the Nigerian police should not wait for INEC to constitute an investigation, arrest, and prosecution. When the evidence are daring and clear, why wait for INEC to write to you before you undertake this regard? And I think we need to get to a point in our country where we don't need the Inspector General of Police to give a directive. What happens to the Commissioner of Police in the state? What happens to even the divisional police officers and other women and men of the Nigerian police force, if truly they are upholding to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and they are loyal to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, not to an individual or someone occupying a political position, then they should act. Because you see, for INEC to be truly independent, you must also match it with a truly independent and unbiased security architecture within the country. And the Nigerian police is the apex security agencies. I believe that they can actually do much more than what they're doing right now. If they're allowed to be independent, they're given the needed resources to equip their manpower with training, with all the equipment they need. I believe that they can rise to the occasion. Because truly, for us to safeguard our democracy, the Nigerian police have a very sensitive role to play. Is it intelligence gathering? Is it protecting the integrity of our democracy and various institutions?
Well, let's come back to the president and his position on the elections now. He said that he's willing to treat his opponents fairly and he's extending a hand of friendship to them. And this is coming on the heels of those who've clamored for him to run an all-inclusive government. What does this mean for the country, considering the statement of the president, and if he indeed follows through?
So, when you look at his speech when he was declared winner, and even when he collected his certificate of return, and I'm glad yesterday he also stressed that in his first speech as president. He talks about national unity and he has extended a hand. I think that is great, to have a national government, a government of national unity and purpose. But for me also, it should be a government of national competence. So yes, if you're extending a hand and you want to bring major opposition members of political party to your government, they must come with value. They must come with competence to also work to deliver on the dividends of democracy. But also, I'm scared of what becomes of opposition in the country. Because for democracy to strive, you need a strong and coordinated opposition. Yes, because the opposition keeps the president and his party on their toes. So again, I think that the opposition, either they choose to accept or not, first, it must be driven by patriotism and putting Nigeria above their selfish or personal interest. But it's still good to extend the hand of fellowship. That hand of fellowship can be, engagement, can be dialogue, can be sharing ideas and collecting feedback. But what is important is we need an effective and efficient, coordinated opposition that puts President Bola Tinubu on his toes, on particularly his promises that he has made to the
Hamza, that's a little confusing, isn't it? Because an all-inclusive government means that the opposition, qualified opposition members, should be a part.
Yeah, but you can be a part of the government and also criticize the government at the same time. Because you being part of the government does not mean you're a majority stakeholder in the government. Maybe it's just 2% or 3% you're getting, or maybe 1%. So again, it's not about the individual who informs, this government of national unity. It's about the institution that is known and recognized as an opposition. Because again, without an opposition, Nigeria cannot afford at this junction to have a one-party state. That would lead to anarchy, God forbid. So again, we need a very strong and vibrant opposition that keeps this new government on her toes.
You had talked about unity of the country, and yesterday we listened to the president speak about how great a nation we are, and how we have survived hardships that would have crippled other nations. Then he promised hope for Nigerians. But then, in your opinion, and as someone who's been actively involved in development, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa, what must he do to fulfill this hope? And I ask that because there are quite a number of persons in the society. In fact, the level of poverty in Nigeria is alarming, and there are people who no longer have hope. But what is hope? And how can he go about it?
Terry, the first thing is justice. You see, I like the fact that he talks about peace, reconciliation. And I think that the president first must lead a national campaign on peace, unity, and national reconciliation that lead to national cohesion. But first, there must be justice. Terry, what happened in Lagos that got people killed during the NSAS protest and the aftermath of the process, or protest rather? How is he going to address it? Hmm? There have been senseless killings across the country that have led to breakdown of law and order. He needs to also address it. People must get a sense of justice to remain peaceful. Today, we have so many groups taking arms against the state. Again, the president must lead by example by ensuring fair. I know he talked about fairness, equity, and justice. But again, the next couple of days will tell if truly he wants to set up maybe a panel of inquiry, an independent panel of inquiry about what happened to young people who lost their lives and who were just protesting because of police brutality. And Terry, the police brutality is still there. When you go sometime on social media spaces, you see young people still complaining about the same thing. So again, I think that as people or civilized people, we must continue to remain hopeful. But our political leader must lead by example and set measures in place that are very clear and well communicated and give a sense of justice. Because without justice, we cannot enjoy an inclusive
But
peace.
you know that when we speak of hope, we must first look at where and how this hope was lost. So being a member of the APC, it would be fair of him to look at the past 8 years and where perhaps the Buhari administration may have failed and caused this loss of hope among certain Nigerians. From your opinion, what must he do differently from the Buhari administration to correct this?
Well, first is to engage, first is to listen, and first is not to surround himself with sycophants. Yes, I wouldn't advise him to dwell on the past, but the past is important to actually shape what the future of our country would be and taking lessons from how his predecessor failed in some aspect of governing the society. So again, for President Bola Tinubu, is for him to really have that dialogue and interface with the Nigerian people, collect feedback. You talked about poverty. Today, we're dealing with multidimensional poverty, extreme poverty. You're dealing with over 130 million people that are losing hope because, one, they don't even know where their next meal will come from. They have to pay for out of pocket to access medical health care. They cannot afford to send their children to school. We're dealing with 30% unemployment rate. So, in rebuilding back that hope, because you see, Nigerians are one of the most patient and resilient people, is to actually, one, ensure that, the country have never been this divided. Again, we're a country that is very sensitive when it comes to religion and ethnic line. So he must tread carefully. He must ensure that in his speech, he talked about, people in the South and people in the North, vis-a-vis seeing themselves as partners towards progress, and whatever happens in the North or South reflects on the people in this region. He must also act it beyond just saying it. He must act it by the representative and the true representation of his government and the people in his government. What are their values? What are their position on these very key sensitive topics? And so they don't jump ahead of the gun and take a position that is more regional rather than national in outlook.
That's tied to healing. And clearly, the president is in a tight position now because of perhaps what many have described as a mistake of his party from the beginning when it went with the Muslim ticket. And it raises a question how the president can balance, this healing, which would, for many, would mean who you appoint and to what position. And then you talk about competence. The balance must be struck at some point. It's a concern, isn't it?
Oh, it is a concern. And this is where, yes, even in politics, you have to, talk about, negotiating power and also creating a balance. In some cases, you have to, and this is the reality of politics. You have to also ensure that people that worked for your victory are somehow compensated. But in doing so, Terry, we must ensure this balance, and the president must clearly, both with his body language, with his action, because the greatest currency right now is perception and how to manage that perception so that people who feel marginalized or people who are minority does not feel left out in that government of national unity. And Terry, yes, for me, I'm bigger with competence rather than even, religion, ethnicity, or tribe. But you must also provide that balance where even if you're, and I believe every region, every religion, and every nooks and cranny of this great country have people with competence, with the right character, with skills, and even with track record to back them up. I believe that he needs to go beyond his comfort to recruit this set of women and men, and also ensure young people are integrated to come and lead his idea of what the Nigerian dream is. And let's even ask ourselves, what is the Nigerian dream? Because you see a lot of people who wants to jackpot. They're jackpotting because of the dream that are sold. In reality, most of them are not even true. But it is perception and how people communicate those perceptions. So I believe first is we must live in a country where people do not die senselessly, or you cannot just leave your house and you're not guaranteed safety and protection by the people that are saddled with the responsibility. We cannot lead a country without consequence. And this is where we are today in Nigeria. There are no consequence or actions or inaction. So he must be bold to even punish people closer to him than people further than him, because he sends a message that if he would punish and hold people to account that are closer to him with the consequence of their action or inaction, then people will sit up. And then Nigeria will now be governed by the rule of law, but also by the conscience of principle.
And that's where the leadership by example comes in, right? Because if you look at the Buhari administration and the number of times they had to disregard the court's orders and more, and here the presidents now say that he would govern according to the rule of law. Is that assuring for you, knowing that you have a president who is openly acknowledging that there may have been some errors with the past administration with regards to respect for the rule of law, but I will not make the same mistake?
You see, I have to be fair to President Bola Tinubu because he's just been sworn in and today is his first day in office. But when you look at President Buhari and President Tinubu, Buhari is a military officer. He was grown by the military, and all his values and ideals is driven by wearing khaki. But President Tinubu is a civilian and have always been a civilian. And that's why probably he's big on the rule of law, And the next couple of days would determine if truly he's leading his government based on the rule of law. Today, we still have the presidential tribunal ongoing. So the outcome of the judgment and how he received it, and most importantly, how he executed, because he is the chief executor in the country, how he executed will now tell us if truly he's matching his words with action.
Hamza, there's something that we had an instant repercussion from the speech of the president, and that's the fuel subsidy issue. And if you look at across the country now, there are queues. This is not new to us, okay? Because Jonathan administration talked about taking away fuel subsidy. The Buhari administration said the same thing. And now the Tinubu administration has said the same thing, even though it is not clear entirely if he has decided to do away with fuel subsidy, because he simply said it is not provided for in the 2023 budget, and so it is gone. What do you make of the stance of the president with regard to fuel subsidy removal?
Terry was clear. He said it is gone in his statement. But if you look at the speech, it was clear, saying that the money that will be saved on subsidy will go to healthcare and education. But he clearly stated it that it was gone. Terry, it is actually gone, because when you look at the 2023 budget, subsidy is only there from January to the end of June. And that's why there's this facility provided by the World Bank, the $100 million, that would help cushion the effects of the immediate impact and response of removing fuel subsidy. Because come to think of it, Terry, over the years, we've been subsidizing the rich, actually. The poor do not benefit from fuel subsidy. It is actually the rich, the people that can afford it. And yes, if you remove it, there will be immediate consequence and impact economically. Maybe we might even deal with inflation. The price of goods and services would skyrocket. But we have to remove it. We spend over 50 billion every day subsidizing PMS. And I hope that we don't get to a point where someone would come and try to manipulate us to amend and ensure. See, Terry, the best thing that would happen to us as a people is to actually remove subsidy. Yes, I can understand the panic, but it has actually been removed. Probably the president did not adequately communicated it. Again, we have an opportunity here, because when you look at countries that border Nigeria, each and every one of them sell PMS at a very high cost. That's why we're dealing with theft. A lot of people would rather come to Nigeria and load their ship, load their cargo, and go and sell across the border because they would make 3 times the profit. So if we remove subsidy and then the market is competitive, then people who don't have to be losing, petroleum and our crude oil from theft. I think that would even help deal with issues around theft and bring some stability and transparency and accountability in the upstream and downstream sector. So again, it is important that the Nigerian people embrace and accept this. But what is not acceptable is people being greedy. The fuel that we have currently in the petrol station have already, subsidy have already been paid on them. So why are people in various petrol stations changing the pump price now? Why? So again, you see, sometimes it's not even the government that is the problem. It is the society itself, the people that takes and sees moments like this to put hardship on the Nigerian people. Again, there is still that instrument created by the World Bank. So maybe now is the time that the president should explore accessing that instrument so that he can quickly provide succor to people who this would greatly impact over poor people.
It's also important for two things. One, for the government to clamp down on those fuel marketers or stations that are taking advantage of the situation, because what they're doing is illegal and wrong. And secondly, it's also important for the government to communicate appropriately and educate Nigerians, especially those whom the opposition may want to take advantage of, to spread certain lies about fuel subsidy. It's important, as you had mentioned, communication across board for Nigerians to understand how important it is to do it with fuel subsidy. And for fuel subsidy now, and the government must somehow come to the aid of the people who will be affected the most.
Yeah. I'm quite happy that for one, civil society are in agreement with the fact that we need to remove fuel subsidy. I'm also excited that the World Bank have created, a pathway through Partnership for Amplified Voices, which is the PAVE initiative that is led by Connected Development and Budget, to engage with civil society and clearly state how this would also impact our country. But I'm also much more excited when the president talked about ensuring that our FX, we have a unified FX, because as you remove subsidy, it would also impact FX. So if you have a unified FX, both at the power market and the CBN, and then you remove subsidy, and also ensure that people have access to FX from the CBN, then I think we can bounce back in no time, where we can also support low-income household with palliative, maybe from instrument from the World Bank or from the savings from subsidy. Because if people can go to hospital and get healthcare insurance coverage, and children can go to school and their education is guaranteed that it's timely, it's free and no hidden fees, then families and households who are low income can bounce back as government also bring policies to help navigate this removal of subsidy.
I think it's also important to have heard the president say that he would address the issue of corruption and by strengthening the efficiency of the anti-graft agency. And for many, it's important to have him say that because of the controversies that surround him, especially just before the elections when it wasn't clear and still isn't clear as to the source of his wealth. However, this is not the first person to say something like that. I've had conversations with civil society organizations and lawyers who have said, so in fact, some have described the EFCC or the anti-graft agencies going for politicians as goats going after lions. What could the president do differently to further strengthen the anti-graft agencies?
I think first is not interfere with their investigation. And I think it's bold for him to talk about corruption. Because when you look at some controversy around him, even before he put his hat in the ring to want to run for office, and also some publication by some investigative reporters and journalists, and also particularly, around the source of his wealth. I think one bold step first is for him to declare his assets publicly, because he sends a message that, okay, he's actually ready to fight corruption. Because when you look at the, the Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International, we're not doing well. So first is for him to declare his asset publicly, because by law, he's meant to declare his assets, as he takes oath of office. after he takes out of office. So he should declare his asset publicly and share this with civil society and the Nigerian people. But to effectively deal with corruption, I think we need to also clearly state, even if we have, the Independent Corrupt Practice and Other Related Offences Commission Act, we also have the, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission Act. We need to clearly define their roles and responsibility, because in some quarters, it's as if it's duplication of effort. And now that we're also talking about reducing the cost of governance, so why do we have so many anti-corruption agencies? Even the Nigerian police also have a fraud unit and various anti-corruption arm within the Nigerian police. So again, it's to tinker, how he can approach the National Assembly and further strengthen these two instruments that fights corruption. Again, maybe this is a point of me now about to speak from a point of bias, because when you look at the act that set up the EFCC, you must be an active or retired police officer to chair EFCC. What this also means is it limits the kind of people that can go there with values and ideals and capacity to actually lead that very important anti-corruption body. So again, maybe the 10th National Assembly needs to remove that impediment. So because Terry, between you and I always want to be the chairman of EFCC, and I just need to be that for 2 years to fight corruption if I get the political will. For my principal, again, let him not interfere. Let him ensure that his political associates do not interfere with the mandate of ICPC or EFCC or other NFIU and other anti-corruption agencies, and allow them to be truly independent and give them the needed resources and manpower. I believe that we would tackle corruption heads on. But we must also start with the politicians who have just left office, who have controversy and who have been entangled in corruption, mismanagement, and embezzlement, where the president would actually allow EFCC, ICPC, and other anti-corruption agencies to go after them. Because one reason why President Buhari agreed on the policy of currency redesign was because some politicians and governors at that time had as much as 50 billion in cash in their coffer, not in the financial institution. So with people with that kind of money, it means that they can actually fuel any level of crisis within the country. So again, it's for the president to allow and ensure neutrality, where he doesn't take preference, and where, we don't see anti-corruption agencies, going after someone because he opposes, some principle of the ruling or the person in office.
Absolutely. Another aspect is security. Now, it would seem that the president has shifted from his initial thought of solution to the security situation, because during campaigns he said that recruiting more men into the military was a solution. But now he says that he would carry out security reforms and fund the military.
The security
agencies. These options are not new. President Muhammadu Buhari did that. The results were not as impressive. I don't know if you think otherwise, but what would the president do differently with regard to reforming the security architecture in the country and funding the security agencies that would address the security situation?
You see, Terry, if we want to learn from United States or other countries that we try to mirror, is taking away military boots from internal security. That's one thing President Buhari did not achieve. You see, the Nigerian military is overstretched. And when you continue to have boots on the ground of uniformed men and women, it undermines Nigeria's democracy. Because we've come out from, military rule over the years. I think that first, I agree with him. Yes, we need to invest heavily, but we must also measure that investment. If we're investing in the capacity and providing them with arms and trainings, we need to measure the investment and the impact of those investments. Who becomes a national security advisor to the president is key. Because right now, you don't tackle insecurity by marching, by deploying arms every now and then. It's about intelligence. How are you gathering intelligence? How are you analyzing this intelligence? How are you also working with civilians to gather intelligence and also enforce this intelligence? How are you able to move resources where it is most needed? And what is informing it? Is it intelligence and data that is informing it? or it's just based on your interests and political cronies. So who becomes the national security advisor is key. For the past years of President Muhammadu Buhari and even successive government, you've not had a civilian or an intelligence officer take charge of that office. I think one of my calls to the president, President Bola Tinubu, is to appoint a civilian as its national security advisor. When I say civilian, an intelligence officer. You know, we have different intelligence agencies. Let it not come from the military. What we've had in previous past, what we have in the past is, you know, a retired military officer, a retired military general. But look at where we are today. All of them came in proudly that, you know, they have all the experience and knowledge. I think the war we are fighting now, it's about intelligence. It's not about equipment. It's about intelligence. And we need someone that can mobilize those resources to get the needed intelligence and data and respond adequately.
As we round off on our conversation on the speech of the president, so that we could look briefly at the immediate past administration. You're familiar with the Jackpot Syndrome, of course, and quite just after the elections, there were narratives that more people would leave the country. After the president's speech yesterday, the conversation was more of a firm president who had an idea of what he wanted to do and who seemed like he would go through with it. So do you think that the president yesterday, just with that speech, may have sort of doused tension and sort of, spoken to the minds of young people, perhaps to prevent them from leaving the country?
Oh, yes. With what the president has said, he has given assurance and hope to particularly my demography and young people like myself. But you see, Terry, when you look at this whole Jackpot Syndrome, it's just some propaganda and narrative that some people are pushing. Terry, I've traveled across a lot of countries, cities, and across continents. And I've witnessed people who were doing very well within the country and left and are struggling because of bad advice and decision that they made. Nigeria is a fertile ground for people to contribute their quota to nation building and help generate wealth, but most importantly, distribute this wealth. Because when you don't distribute this wealth and ensure equity and justice, that's where crises erupt. So the president has given that confidence and have helped out the tension. But you know, what was even leading to that debate, particularly on the digital space about Jackpot, was the uncertainty of the transition. But, you know, the judiciary played a key role, the Nigerian security agencies rise up to the occasion and nip the bug. And today we have a new government in place, which ensure that, you know, there's that smooth transition of our democracy, of government, and the continuity of entrenching Nigeria's democracy.
Let's talk about the former president, immediate past president, Muhammadu Buhari. Yes, we have a new president, but we cannot ignore the one we just had. And in his speech on Sunday, he apologized for any economic policies that may have hurt Nigerians. He, however, rates himself really high. So I just want to get a general assessment from you. What's your perception of the past 8 years under President Muhammadu Buhari was?
You know, I'll be a bit biased because, you know, he signed the Not Too Young to Run bill. He signed the PIA bill. But I think it was very insensitive of him to also compare the Nigerian people with his cows. You know, that was really insensitive of him, and that does not connote someone who is a national leader. Yes, you know, he asked for forgiveness. It's now left for the Nigerian people to either forgive him or, you know, they take it up with him when we all appear in front of our Creator. But I think that President Muhammad Buhari couldn't have given us more than what he can deliver on. You know, people only give you what is based on their own capacity as an individual. And I think this is where the Nigerian people need to understand that there are consequences with decisions we make when we go to the poll, when we hold our ballot paper after accreditation, whatever you don't print, there are consequences to it. And President Muhammad Buhari is one of those consequences. He's a fulfilled man. And why wouldn't he rate himself high? The only thing the only dream he has was to be the president of Nigeria. And that came to pass. So he would rate himself high, that he has done well, you know, with senseless killings, with insecurity, as even a former military general, with high unemployment, high inflation. You know, yeah, he would definitely rate himself high. But again, like I said, I'll be a bit biased because he signed the Not Too Young to Run law in 2019. He signed the PIA Act and a few other, like the Almajiri, also the Almajiri Commission Act. So I hope history will be fair and kind to him, but he must be also held to account and he must take responsibility for the senseless killings and lives that have been lost under his watch.
Absolutely. Should the President Tinubu, hold the president's appointees to account? We know it's not in the nature of this country or lead presidents to look back at their predecessors, but should the president hold President Muhammadu Buhari's appointees to account on some of the policy failures that have affected lives in this country, especially those with huge amounts? We'll talk about some of the social intervention programs that have not been, that till date have not been accounted for. Should those monies go to waste or should the people go free?
So, Terry, you cannot separate President Muhammadu Buhari's appointee from President Muhammadu Buhari. If you want to go after his appointees, then you have to also hold him to account. But what I would advise President Bola Tinubu is, yes, you can review, you can investigate, and have a panel of inquiry on conditional cash transfer, trader money, market money, or the social intervention program. What are the gaps? What are the leakages? Help close the gaps and leakages. Publish your findings. But as a country, we cannot remain stagnant. We cannot, continue to chase shadows and continue to chase shadows in our past. We must move forward, but take the lessons from the past and also ensure that there are consequences in place and send a strong message that any of his own or anybody under his own administration that are found wanting, before he hands over power, he does the needful by investigating them and putting them behind bars. So, but for me, yes, let's interrogate it. Let's look at the gaps. Let's look at the weaknesses. Let's look at the leakages. Let's close them and work together. But let's face what is ahead of us, because the Nigerian people have hope and they're waiting for him to deliver on his promises.
As we round off now, let's talk about the 10th National Assembly now. We have a president who's what they say once a lawmaker or was a lawmaker, so he was a senator. And then we have a 10th National Assembly incoming. What do you expect of the working relationship between these two, considering that the president understands the workings of the National Assembly?
Terry, without the National Assembly, what we have is full-blown dictatorship. So what it means is the 10th National Assembly must understand and recognize the role that they bring. That their role, one, is to hold the executive to account, oversight to the executive, but most importantly, also interface with the Nigerian people, because that place is a symbol of our democracy and it represents the interests of the collective Nigerian people, because every constituent in the country have a representative there. Yes, it is great that he has the knowledge and experience of how it's functioned as a former lawmaker, but he must also not interfere in their dealings, and particularly in what becomes the leadership of both the House and the Senate. He must not interfere in it. Yes, they should have cordial relationship.
That's too late now, isn't it?
No, they must have cordial relationship, but we cannot afford to have another repeat of what we experienced during the 9th Senate, particularly the Senate, that the perception around them was a rubber stamp, Senate, for the president. That cannot hold in this very critical moment. We need a National Assembly that will lead debate, that will lead public hearing, and hold executive and their appointees to account.
He talked about a bill, the Omnibus Jobs and Prosperity Bill, which he would send to the National Assembly. And hopefully there's a good relationship from the leadership tussle that's going on now for that bill to see the light of day. But as a young person, that bill is supposed to improve the unemployment rate in the country. What do you expect? What are some of the contents of that bill that you anticipate?
Well, one thing I anticipate is, it is not government's job to create jobs. It is their job and role to create an enabling environment. So what I want to see is a bill or a law that creates an enabling environment where businesses can strive. How can we invest more in microeconomy? Because Nigeria's economy is an informal economy. So do we have access to loan, credit, grant, the various financial schemes that the government would lead? How can they ensure that it is fair and there's an equal distribution of wealth to people who are even not in communities where you have access to technology? Because when you do that, you create opportunities, but you also create jobs and you create engagement where people that are engaged in social vices are now busy contributing their quota to our own economy that would make it more vibrant.
Hamza Lawal, thank you very much for your time, and I like your optimism with the new president. Thank you very much for your time.
Terry, thank you for having me.
Hamza Lawal is the CEO of Connected Development. They focus on ensuring that they teach the citizens how to hold their leaders accountable. I'd like to thank you as well for your time. You can catch this episode and others by simply going to YouTube and searching Political Paradigm, or go to channelstv.com. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.